Hello, it is a pleasure to be here today as part of the Faculty Research Days. I am Marijke D'Haese, and on behalf of my colleagues Jeroen Buysse and Michaël De Clercq, I want to give you a glimpse of the work that we are doing on measuring the economic and social impacts of digitalization in rural areas. This work is part of the DESCRIPTIVE project. DESCRIPTIVE stands for Digitization, Economic and Social Impacts in Rural Areas. It is a Horizon 2020 project which is financed up to 2023. It is coordinated by the University of Pisa, and we are one out of the 25 partners involved in this project. The project looks at how the society responds to challenges and opportunities of digitalization in rural areas. In the framework of this project, Jeroen and I joined forces within the Department of Agricultural Economics. We have complementary expertise because Jeroen's expertise is to model decision-making processes and evaluating rural policies issued by institutions of different levels. My personal expertise is in analyzing rural development patterns and more in particular food systems. My research is done in the Global South, where questions of digitalization are very important too. Michaël De Clercq is a PhD student under the supervision of Jeroen and myself. Within the DESCRIPTIVE project, our role is to help mapping the past and the present, and more in particular, we were asked to do a pan-European assessment on the current state of digitalization in the rural areas and to try to measure its corresponding economic impact. We are working within Work Package 2. One of the particular challenges we are facing in doing this work is the availability of data and the level that allows us to identify the rural areas. We are working at NUTS 3 level, and we use the Eurostat data to distinguish rural from intermediary and urban areas across European countries as mapped out here. Our main problem was to find data that signals the levels of digitalization. We are using a time series of connectivity data that maps the broadband connection with different speeds. We are distinguishing data of connectivity of 30 megabits per second and connectivity at 100 megabits per second. We defined broadband coverage by the share of households that had access to the broadband at these speeds. In the map that I have here, we colored the regions by their coverage. The darker the region, the more households in these regions have a broadband connection of at least 30 megabits per second. One can easily see how between 2011 and 2018, the whole of Europe secured access and the rural areas are catching up. Yet not everywhere. There are still some lighter spots in the maps in a few countries where the rural areas were not widely connected, or not at least as widely connected as the urban areas. This divide between the rural and the urban areas in terms of connectivity is even larger when we looked at the connectivity at 100 megabits per second. This graph here plots the areas across their levels of rurality on the one hand and the broadband coverage at 100 megabits per second for a number of countries. Even for the fairly densely populated countries we selected here, the difference between the rural and the urban areas are clear. Then to analyze the impact of connectivity, we estimated an econometric model. in which we link, on the one hand, the broadband connectivity to, on the other hand, economic growth, which we proxied by changes in real gross domestic product per capita, which we measured in 2020 purchasing power parities. In this econometric model, we account for rural, intermediary, and urban regions across multiple sectors and countries, as well as controlling for the influence of past economic growth, population growth, and proxies for investments and trade openness. Hence, we try to establish the relationship between broadband, connectivity, and economic growth, as mediated by the control variables. Yet, as we have shown here, the model we are using needs also to account for possible inverse impact that economic growth drives these aspects of broadband connectivity, but also trade, openness, investment levels, and even population growth. The results point to a stronger relationship in the urban areas, but to a weaker relationship between broadband connectivity and economic growth in the rural areas. Our conclusions from the econometric modeling are therefore that providing broadband access stimulates economic growth. We found a weaker effect in the rural regions compared to urban and intermediate regions. We also found that broadband coverage has diminishing returns to scale, which means that in areas where already many people are connected to broadband, the effect that this has on economic growth is lower. We had hoped to expand our analysis, but we lacked regional data. It would have been of great interest to try to link our analysis of broadband connectivity to social indicators as those included in the DESI index. Yet the data of those parameters, like social impacts, are not detailed enough at NUTS 3 level to do a detailed analysis for the rural regions. In conclusion, our work so far is that the urban-rural digital divide remains persistent across time and technological advancements. The effects of broadband coverage on economic growth is lower in rural areas as compared to intermediate areas and urban areas, but simply providing broadband coverage in the rural areas will not suffice, because fast and reliable network access is a modern-day prerequisite for economies to grow. Fast and reliable network access will allow structural changes in the rural industries, both in farm and non-farm activities. Large heterogeneity requires country-specific analysis, and the lack of data limits a more quantitative analysis within regional Europe. Thank you very much for listening to me throughout this presentation on our work within the DESIRA project. If you want to have more details on the project itself, as well as on the results of our group, but also of that of our partners, I've added some details here with some online access to these results. There is a web page, there is a LinkedIn page, there is Facebook, there is Twitter, all of that showing the results of the project. If you would like to contact me with regards to this project, as well as with other opportunities within the European projects or else, here are my contact details with the Department of Agricultural Economics, and my email address and phone numbers are there. Thank you very much.